يسأل الليل والنهار والناس في حبه سكار قاموا على شطه الرحيم والناس في حبه سكار قاموا على شطه الرحيم والناس في حبه سكار قاموا على شطه الرحيم سرك الرحيم ومنبك التائب الغريب يا نيل يا ساحر العيون يا واهب الخلد للزمان يا ساقي الحب والأغاني يا واهب الخلد للزمان يا ساقي الحب والأغاني يا واهب الخلد للزمان يا ساقي الحب والأغاني هاتسقني واسقني ودعني أهيب كالطريق في الجنان هاتسقني واسقني ودعني أهيب.
Hello, everyone. One last time, I want to welcome you at Kanzaman event discussion.
Hello, everybody, also from my side. Hi, hello, everyone. I will ask my lovely colleague to please spotlight all the lovely panelists. Welcome, everybody, in the discussion. This is the last thing we are doing in this event. I cannot believe it's really the end. I hope everybody enjoyed as much as possible, but now comes the very important part. We are going to discuss some interesting topics. So let's just wait when we spotlight also Shahrzad. Yes, perfect. Hi. So let me welcome these. Hi. Welcome all these three panelists. We have here Nisaa, we have here Yulia, Farid, and Shahrzad. And I will be just in the role of moderator. And these three ladies will discuss, but also with, I think, with our input questions. And actually, I don't know if you are familiar with this the way of scientific discussion works at festivals. So just let me, I have to nerd about it. Sorry. So when you have discussion as a part of science festival, there are always panelists. Each of them says their opinion on one topic, a little bit, just few sentences, what they feel about it, and or not feel. With science, you need some facts, right? But here we can work with feelings, that's fine. And after that, after each of the participants or panelists says their opinion and their ideas, then it's time for the audience. Yes, you, all of you who oh, my English, everybody of you, everybody of you can ask questions. Okay, so you can use the chat, or to make it more family-like, you can also ask the questions, just unmute yourself and just give us the question and we can discuss. So this is not only about us four talking, it's all about you as well, all right? And I would like to encourage all the other teachers who are also joining, please don't worry, join the discussion and we can start. So the topic of the discussion is golden era and modern times. So under this, plenty of things are hidden. For example, many of you, I think everybody noticed that golden era is coming back because you're at this festival. So I guess you're interested in it. The question is why it's happening this, and is it important to learn about history of Raqs Sharqi? Are there any aspects which are coming back that happened in past and coming back in a present moment and so on? So there are plenty of questions, and I would like to now ask the panelists to just share some idea they have when we say golden era and modern times. So I'm going to start with the historian here, Nisaa, who it will be. I think it's Nisaa, so please, Nisaa, go ahead and tell us.
Okay, well, you know, when I gave some thought to this topic, because honestly, I feel sometimes with the research that I do, that it can seem very obscure and esoteric and like, who cares about what was happening at the turn in the 19th and 20th centuries? I know you do. But you know, then I thought, well, in fairness to myself, I think why I started down the path of this research and why I do think it's very important is because learning about the history gives us perspective on what's happening in the present, and we can understand the dance in the present with that historical context. That's why ultimately I think it's very important. And a corollary to that is that things that often we hear about in contemporary Raqs Sharqi that are decried as damaging the dance, okay? When we look at the dance over time, and not just in my period of study, but in general, we see that in some ways there's really nothing new under the sun. And a lot of these issues that are brought up and argued about on, you know, internet discussions are things that have always been present in the industry. So, for example, something that gets thrown about a lot on the interwebs is this idea that foreign dancers have come into Egypt and are ruining belly dance. And that's, when you look historically, is a little bit ludicrous, because there have always been foreigners in this industry, always, from the beginning. Even before Raqs Sharqi was Raqs Sharqi as we know it, there were foreigners migrating into Egypt and working in this trade. So that's a spurious kind of argument. Another issue that gets thrown around a lot is this issue that the dance is being hypersexualized now, and that's making it vulgar and, again, damaging the dance, okay? And when we look at the dance historically, there have always been sexual elements. Now, the degree of how that's expressed varies from performer, individuality of a performer, to the context of the performance, and a range of other factors. But that aspect has always been there, and not just in dance, but in other kinds of traditional art in not just Egypt, but in the Arab world. I encourage everybody to check out George's translation of all those dirty stories from the Book of Songs, right? So that too is kind of a spurious argument. Nothing new under the sun. And then lastly, another issue is the skimpy costumes, right? The naked costumes. And, you know, Egyptians themselves bring this up a lot, is like the golden era dancers were more proper because they, you know, they were covering themselves, and but just a cursory glance at the costumes that were being worn by the star dancers in the golden era really makes it quite clear that skimpy costumes aren't really a new thing either. So I think this historical perspective allows us to kind of, it throws some water on this fire on social media about, oh, the dance, what's happening to the dance? Well, these are things that have always been part of the dance, right? And the other point I'd like to make is that when we look at the history, it also demystifies this issue of hybridization. I think sometimes there's a tendency for practitioners outside of Egypt to want the dance to be like a museum piece, right? That is on a shelf and it's pure, right? Undiluted, pure, distilled Egyptian dance. And that's not reality. The dance has always been fusing in elements from other cultures. But the issue there is that they've been fusing things in ways that appealed to them as performers, to their audiences who are generally Egyptian. So hybridization does not mean inauthenticity. And that's a real issue we run into in the dance world at large, of foreign dancers outside of Egypt wanting a pure, undistilled dance when the reality is much more complicated. And also those same foreigners thinking, well, if it's impure, it's inauthentic. And that's inappropriate thinking as well, because certainly for Egyptians, for them, it's still their dance. Yeah. So, and I think to close, I think that when we look at all the hybridization and innovation that has happened throughout the history of the dance, it's possible then to draw out what are the unifying threads across the eras, across individual performers who are all very unique, the things that do make the dance Egyptian. Because if I stood Shafi al-Ibtiya, Tahia Carioca, Shahrzad, Dina, and Sofinar in a room and put on the same song, I think a lot of foreigners would think they were looking at different dances. But we know that there are unifying themes that connect all these dancers and all their stylizations through time and through different personalities. So those are my thoughts, I think, on why this history is very important to us now.
Thank you very much, Nisaa. I exactly thought that you will address this, why history is important to learn and why it's important to look at it. So we have this view from the historical point, let's say, and I would like to now ask Shahrzad, because she's now, not just now, but she's working in Cairo for several years as a dancer where dancing is the everyday job there. So what are your thoughts?
I'll unmute myself here. Can you hear me okay? I need my mic closer.
We got used to your great microphone from the last lecture.
Is it better now?
Yes, it's better.
Okay. Because now I'm using the one on the stand. It's better now?
It's again slightly better, yeah. But we can hear you. We can adjust our volumes. I think
Is it better enough?
I think it's fine, yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So, what am I gonna say after I listen to Nisaa talk? Oh boy. Anyway, I'll give a little bit about my perspective and thoughts on this issue. You know, one thing that's been a really interesting experience for me as a working dancer has been to have one foot in the actual commercial entertainment industry in the Middle East and one in the dancer for dancer, foreign workshops, classes industry for a long time. So in America, even when I started dancing, I wasn't teaching first. I was working at a lot of live music nightclubs in Philadelphia and New York City. There's actually huge Middle Eastern populations in America, and there are clubs that are catering specifically to these populations. So one lucky opportunity I had as a very young dancer, probably illegally young dancer, as 17-year-old working in nightclubs with live bands, I got to experience this before I went into the industry of teaching, which is usually the opposite for people. I was taking classes for years in many different styles. Egyptian style really stood out to me. I was very lucky early on to have a lot of teachers who studied a lot of folklore, who had traveled extensively in the Middle East, who could give me a lot of training in more, I don't know, traditional styles, let's say, as opposed to more fusion styles. So I had the luck of having all of these. And then I moved here around the same time that I started touring and teaching. So it was extremely interesting for me to look at these two different sides of the industry. And this has to do with why I think studying Golden Era is so important. Because these days I see such an incredible disconnect and growing divide between what actually happens in the countries of origin and what people think about the dance and the dancers that people like, and what's happening outside in the festival circuit, the dancers people like, why they like them. I've been looking at a lot of these things as I've been working in these two sections of our industry, which are very separate, right? Looking at these differences. And one thing I've really seen is there's some things still in the industry here that are very different than what people outside want. And when we look, like Nisaa said, when we look at common threads, let's say musicality and movements that we see repeated over and over that are a standard in the dance, that still to a certain extent persists here, but I see it persisting less or even not at all in the foreign dance world, the outside dance world. They don't have the same standards of movement. They don't have the same standards of musicality. So it's changing the dance on both ends and polarizing these two styles that we see. So I think it's so incredibly important to study the music, especially Golden Era music, and some of the intermediate musicians we see that started more of the modern styles like Adawiya, really get in tune with the music, what the traditional musicality was to these artists, and what the movement vocabulary at its base level was. Because one thing that I see, I will kill you, Marshall. One thing that I see, especially when it comes to movement and musicality, is a total departure from what Middle Eastern audiences and dancers have traditionally done and liked, right? So I see this new trend of like The musicality being all about hitting dramatic accents, and the preference for foreign audiences, like I'm on a judging panel, the preference towards Western movement, right? I see the higher scores going to the girls with the most gymnastic training, who can do the most impressive backbends, who can do the most impressive spins and hair work. But this isn't the original vocabulary of the dance. Whereas in countries like Egypt, look at some of the most recent famous dancers like Safinar. The foreign dance world would not get why people like her. But she, for me, is doing stuff that I would liken to Awalim style. Some of her movements remind me a lot of those traditional styles. And when you look at the history of Golden Era, I think you can really start to see, like Nisaa said, it was a great way, threads that connect the different generations. They're there in the musicality and in the common base vocabulary, because of course, every famous dancer has her own special movements that she's going to add into the dance. And we see that in every generation. But that's not the base vocabulary of movement, right? That's not where we should start, right? Because that's going to be unique for each dancer. So I think when you go back and you study the history and you really take these kind of things into account, it's much more easy to see the common threads over time, and also to know what you should be focusing on when you dance to continue this tradition, as opposed to totally separate the dance from its traditional roots and values into something that's literally just made to please Western audiences and eyes. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Shahrzad. I think it was very nicely going through what we heard from Nisaa and now you, and actually it leads very nicely to Yulia, because Yulia is one of the most well-known dancers right now in the world, and and she is working a lot with elements from Golden Era, also in her modern way of dancing. And as we heard yesterday at the gala show, you have said that for you said it so beautifully, that Golden Era for you is your own Golden Era. I'm sorry, I'm completely messing around. And I know you have a lot to say, because there is some personal story behind. So please share your thoughts, whatever you would like to add to this.
Thank you, Badra. You picked up really everything correctly. And thank you very much, Nisaa and Shahrzad, because my speech will be really the continuation of your speeches. First of all, there is a real sad story behind, actually quite a sad story. So it's going to be like confessions on the dance floor, because I was about to stop dancing. And Shahrzad, what you were telling about their dancers who are doing kind of, I will call it fusion, or that is something that is bringing us very far from traditional Oriental. That was kind of the trap that I felt I was in. And I had to attempt to start dancing Golden Era. It was like 2014, and then I kind of gave up very fast. And then another attempt was in 2017. And that's where I had the dramatic situation, because I spent 1 month in China, about 1 month, teaching classes every day. And when I came back home, I watched my videos on the phone, because you're recording all the workshops. And I looked and I was like, I don't like this girl. I don't like this girl. She's lying. What she's doing, she's fake. She's just doing typical movements, typical poses, typical hairstyle, typical backbends, and so on and so on and so on. So, we all were now dividing the world into, Argentinian belly dance, Ukrainian belly dance, Russian belly dance, American, Chinese, and so on and so on and so on. So without any offense to any of the styles, but I felt being a very typical representative, because I believe that each dancer is unique. But once we stop searching and we just take the ready decisions, dance decisions on the dance floor, we're start doing something typical because we want to be as this dancer or another dancer. So I felt that I just, for a period, I started choosing their typical road, which was typical probably in Ukraine, typical for my colleagues, from other dancers. So I did the same hair extension, I did their same sad songs, the same stuff with all these emotions and falling down and backbends and backbends, which is fine for other people who really feel it. So I don't want to underestimate the work of other people with that. But I felt that I am lying. It was a certain moment when I came back home. I still remember it was January 2018. I took away that extension. I stayed with the short hair and I was like, I don't know if I want to continue dancing. So that was really a sad moment because I felt like I have so many invitations to teach and I'm not sure that I want to go because I need to say, if I'm saying something in the class, it has to be the truth. It's something that I really do feel I want to say. It's something that I do feel I want to dance and to share. And I felt that I'm not sure if I'm sharing what I really feel. In that moment, I started searching again. I was searching for inspiration, for something that will give me back the wish to dance and wish to create something new. And that was the second time when I started again watching different videos. And literally, I have their notebook where I was writing their videos and the move, the video and the move, and the smile. 0037, she smiled like that. So I made literally the diary of the smiles, of the behavior and of the moves of golden era dancers. That's how I started creating the first choreos, which were quite fantasy style. Why also I'm an entertainer in the past. Before I started teaching, I was working a lot in Kyiv in the different places. But on it's opposite to what you have in the United States, for example, Shahrzad and Nisaa, because we don't have their their Middle Eastern audience almost at all. You'll like hardly find any Lebanese or Egyptian restaurant. So you need to think in the way Ukrainians think mostly. And you need to find something to entertain this type of audience without, without probably our traditional Oriental dances. So you need to find something. And the same thing about the festivals which I attended. I felt like I'm not sure really to start showing pure golden era style, but I was thinking, what if I start changing my own style? What if I, instead of the ready decisions to do their backbend or hair stuff, I will replace it with something not typical. Then besides Ukrainian style is everything about faster, stronger, and again, faster and stronger. So I was thinking, what if I will just stop in the middle of the dance? What if I will stop and I will be just looking at my audience? What if I will just start working with my shoulder and I will have the time to see the reaction because I will not be running nowhere. I'll just stop. So that's how I started implementing golden era moves into my choreographies. I didn't have any particular idea like I want to dance golden era style. I'm going to start the research about golden era style. It was already the second part of my development. It started with their updating my own style and searching for something that I will feel really the connection. That's what I was also said that like, this is my personal golden era because I really felt there's such a strong change in myself. Like when I start smiling, I am sincere. I don't need to fake it like I was sometimes doing before. And then after that, I started studying because I felt the responsibility as well, because, I started using the moves. And if I'm saying, look, I'm doing the fantasy style, it's not really pure golden era. But a lot of people were like thinking, oh, Julia's doing golden era. And I'm like, yay, not really golden era, not yet, because like, I don't want also to create the confusion. So people will look at me and will say like, oh, this is golden era. And then they watch the old videos and like, no, she's doing something different. She's not doing actually pure golden era. So then I felt more and more wish and responsibility to study, to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. So it is, for me, it's like, I'm not even discussing it like if you should learn golden era. To me, it's like it's part of us. It's part of what we're doing. Like we cannot exist like it's our roots. It's our roots. Like so, to me, it's something that has to be studied for their respect to the culture, from their perspective. The same thing, like we need to learn the history, like, to know the history of the world, at least in general, to understand what's going on and to understand that there are the cycles, that there something that is coming back in the history, and we're like, oh, okay, that happened. So we understand the processes. The same thing in the dance. To understand the processes, we need to know from where we arrived. Sometimes when I hear that, like, oh no, golden era is not Raqs Sharqi, I'm like, okay. Or accordion is a traditional ballet instrument. I'm like, So, yes, exactly. Exactly. Sorry, I think Shahrzad wanted to say something. No? No? No. I thought that you were Okay.
Thank you very much, Yulia. It's okay. I shouldn't be the one who is discussing. I should just lead the discussion, but sorry, I have to say something as well, because I felt exactly the same. I had very similar story. Well, I was not in China though, but I truly understand the sudden disconnection from what is expected and what one would like to do. And it is true what Shahrzad said, that there are differences when a dancer is, I say, festival dancer. Yeah, going to festivals, teaching and performing. It's one part of the job, or you can be fully devoted to it. Or there are dancers who are fully devoted to performing for the audience in the nightclubs, restaurants, wherever. And yeah, so these two worlds. But I don't want to. Well, I'm very like neutral around this. If I don't want to say that what's happening on festivals, it's completely wrong and it should not exist. But it's true that it can go into extent that it's really far away, as Shahrzad said, because I think it goes with the time. We see nowadays that everything has to be instant. Everything has to be fast and immediate. Okay. And yeah, and I think that's what's happening in the world of Raqs Sharqi on the festivals as well, when the dancer who is entering the workshop just wants to learn quickly, give me the choreography, I learn it and I'm done. We all witness this. I've been there as well in that place. I remember like 10 years ago, I wanted it. I just give me the choreography so I can dance it. I've been at that place as well. And I've been at that place, as you said, Yulia, also. I was when my first attempts of Golden Era, interestingly, I've chosen always the fantasy dances. It was the Orientalism in me, the embedded thing. And I have to admit it was like that. And later on with some research, suddenly, as Nisaa did, like this mind-blowing thing that, I have chosen actually what I wanted the Golden Era to look like. And I think that it's very important to think of this aspect when we are trying to do Golden Era dances or practice, learn it, to be aware of this selection, that our brain wants to select what fits. So I just wanted to say this little thing about the fantasy. Please, if anybody else wants to say, please go ahead.
Can I say something? Would it be okay?
Please, Shining, yes.
Just based off what you're guys saying, I'm going to try and keep my brain focused. It's already trying to go off in tangent land, but I think that, what I'm observing, like if I'm responding to everything you're saying and based off of what I've observed and through my own process as well, is that there's like, I don't know, for whatever reason, in my head, it's like a tube. And a lot of us, even if we have years of experience in the dance, but if we don't start with the cultural context, if we didn't really get a lot of exposure to the dancers of origin, past or present, I feel like we get to a point where there's structure around the outside of the tube, it's built up, but like the inside of the tube is empty. And we're searching for, like, for me it became a roots search, like what came before, like how do I understand what I'm doing now, or like the feeling that is, you know, coming into it. And I think that as someone growing up in the culture, you know, like they're being enculturated. The process of enculturation happens naturally. They get the exposure as they're growing up and learning, and they don't think about it. And it basically, like, the tube is created from the inside out. It's not a tube, it's a rod or whatever, right? Where we, as often learning as adult foreign people, kind of have to work from the outside in, where we start with technique, and we look at choreography and polish, or maybe it's the music that pulls us in, and then we start to get interested in, well, what is this really? And it forces us to sort of go back. And I think as an industry, we're almost at the, like, we're at that perimeter about to fall off the edge of the earth, or like we're hit a wall or whatever, where there's no much farther to go, because it's all the technique, it's all the mentalization, it's all the perimeter or whatever. I don't know if I'm verbalizing this well, but this is the feeling in my head. And we're, as an industry, going, you know, where do we draw from? And like Yulia was saying, like, having to fill the tube or fill the inside world with context, with clues, with enculturating ourselves by observation and study and immersion. That's my idea, at least.
Yes, Nisaa, please go ahead.
Yeah, I want to circle back to this point about the disconnect between what's happening in Egypt and the workshop circuit, or the community in general outside of Egypt, which both Shahrzad and Julia really explicated that really well. I think that depending on what community you're in, it's easy to exist and do this dance form without the checks and balances of Arab or Egyptian audiences, right? So like Julia mentioned, you know, not really having that in Ukraine, but even in the United States, it's very variable from place to place. And, you know, I know dancers who, I will say, deliberately avoid dealing with people of the cultures of origin, because they don't want the checks and balances on what they're doing. And so it builds this chasm. And a problem that layers into this is, on the workshop circuit, we have a lot of Egyptian teachers, but a lot of those teachers are ex-theatrical folklore dancers, okay? Reda troupe dancers, Kalmia troupe dancers, who were not necessarily working belly dancers and have a certain vision of what belly dance is or what it should be. And I think that sometimes when non-Egyptians take classes in, you know, it's an Orientalist kind of assumption that this is an Egyptian teacher, therefore every word that spills forth from his or her mouth is gospel. But Egypt is a big culture and it's very diverse. And there's a big difference between the traditional entertainer world and the institutionalized entertainer world of the theatrical folklore. And so that, in a way, because on the workshop circuit, those instructors are selling product that students want. And so they feed back into the mentality of the workshop circuit and drive a wedge further between. And this is why, one of the reasons why a lot of dancers outside of Egypt don't know Sophie Nar, for example, because she's not on the circuit, right? And she wouldn't really succeed on the circuit, at least not at the moment, because her dancing is tailored at her market, which is Egyptian, not foreign, right? So this is a massive issue. And I know some of you have heard me preach this gospel before, so I apologize for being, for beating the horse that's dead over and over again. But I just think it's very important to acknowledge this issue, right? Because we're talking generally about this disconnect, right? Side note too, you know, both of you, Shahrzad, Julia, you brought up, you know, being inspired by Golden Era, and I think what we forget is all the famous Egyptian dancers, when you ask them who are their favorite dancers, they're always going back to the Golden Era, because those are the dancers they grew up watching on TV and in movies. So they are informed by the Golden Era. So why shouldn't we be, right? So anyway, those are just a couple comments I wanted to share.
Yeah, I agree.
Settle down, Shahrzad.
Please, anybody can go ahead if you want. Don't wait for me to say yes, you can or not. I was, when I was having in my mind this discussion into what topics we could go, I thought that we will reach this one at the end, and and we are here already 45 minutes after, and we are discussing, which that is fine, absolutely. With the fact, like, we are now a little bit like ranting about what's going on with the evolution of the dance, because, and I'm not talking about what's happening now in Cairo, I'm talking about the dance in the world, because the dance is across the globe. It's being taught everywhere. We have huge festivals everywhere. So it is outside Egypt, definitely. But there are accounts where we see that exactly the same happened when Raqs Sharqi was born. Not every awalim was very happy about what's happening in those clubs, right? So what do you think? I'm just giving a question. That's my role, to give questions. Are we at the point where there is a new, I cannot say the word because I don't have the word, new style being formed as a festival version of Raqs Sharqi, something like that? What do you think? Are we at this crossroad or not? Let me know what you think.
It's kind of like the difference between competition Latin dancing and actual Latin dancing, right?
Oh God, I want to talk about this so bad, you guys. Yo, that is such a good example that Nisaa brought up. And that's the example that sometimes I give people. Like, if you think about a lot of Latin dances in their indigenous traditional forms, and then ballroom competition dance, so much of the time when I go to some belly dance festivals, this is what it looks like to me. They've taken some of the base moves, they've making a caricature of the costuming and made it into something that might vaguely harken back to the original style, but it's something that's totally new. Does that make sense? So I think it's already happened. This style that's really just circulating within festivals and with other belly dancers, and I've seen the reverse effect of that, of girls who have won tons of competitions in the international scene, have taught and toured and judged, and then they come to Egypt thinking that they really know how to dance. And then they dance for an Egyptian audience and they don't get the reception that they got outside. Like, that's happening now. That is definitely a thing. And it's just something, it's like Badria said, it's not something like it shouldn't happen. Don't do that. But we at least need to be aware of the separation of these two styles and the way that they're developing. Because so much of the time I see a lot of disrespect thrown back at indigenous working dancers from uneducated outside dancers who really literally just don't know what they're looking at a certain point. And I think that is a huge problem. When we reach that point, that is a huge problem. So the education is the most important part. It's not about telling people you should do this or this. As long as we're informed about what we're looking at, I think we can move forward in a much better way. And I have another Cairo working dancer here with me, Maris.
I was wondering if I can make a comment or not.
Yes. Oh, she wants to make a comment. Is that okay? Maris, if you guys don't know her, she's a working dancer here in Cairo, and she's from Estonia, and she's had a really great career dancing in weddings here. She's very popular and appeared in some really popular music videos as well.
Thank you for the introduction. It's going to be very, very short. I just wanted to say about the same comment, that how it's coming back when the dancers come here and they don't get the same feedback. But what happens is that Egyptian dancers see that, and if they get better and more popular, like in the time they get more popular, they will get that feedback, they will like mix it. But Egyptian dancers start to dance more like that. Have you seen like how it turns the Egyptian one more to the festival one, and it's all like getting blended?
Yes, and that's another really interesting thing that I've noticed about some Egyptian dancers that started touring, and how much their style changed when they started working primarily for foreign audiences. So that's a really good point as well.
It's a conversation always. I'm sorry, Julia. I'm going to. Yeah, it's always conversation. It's interesting how it's happening even in folk dances. There was this example of particular Turkish dance. I'm sorry, I will be very vague now because I don't want to say any incorrect details. So in America, there was this fashion of dancing Turkish dance and nothing more. Nisaa is laughing, maybe you can provide more details. And they dance it with a skirt, like with this big skirt or something like that. And then when they met real dancers from Turkey, they said, oh, we don't dance with these skirts, but they actually kind of liked it. And that element went back, although it didn't exist there. So that's interesting. So I found it very interesting. So it's definitely a conversation constantly. And the second point just got out of my mind, so I'm not going to do here. Please, anybody who wants to comment.
Okay, I will comment also. The problem I think now is not that we have a new style, but we have lots of new styles. And lots of foreigners bring their own culture into Oriental dance. For example, I can speak about the Russian and Ukrainian world, about the Slavic world. And the point is that lots of dancers start searching outside, not inside. I'm speaking about their Egyptian culture. Instead of searching inspiration in folklore, instead of searching inspiration in the roots of this dance, they start searching outside, inventing the new styles, which is fine. I do appreciate that the dance is developing and gets its new forms. But I mean, when you add a new form or you replace, it's different. So when you develop the dance and you, for example, I don't know, you do the drum solo and then you do the modern drum solo with, I don't know, with Vogue, with whatever, it's fine if you call it fusion. If you develop it as a new style, which is separate from, but when it is replaced, and it's replaced by many famous dancers, all over the world, that traditional forms are replaced with something else, with inspiration taken from other styles, which is fine because it also happened in Golden Era period, when the two cultures interlace, and then you have their like new forms of the dance. But when it's becoming the new truth, when it's taught as a pure Oriental, then you see this, that's what Shahrzad said, the dancers who are coming, the foreign dancers come to Cairo, for example, to participate in the competition, and they do their like totally like crazy style, crazy from the point of view of Egyptian dancers, like I know dancing ballet, but like all they're very in a very, very, very modern way. And then it's getting really like two polar styles. What was their traditional Oriental, and then something totally new, that's something artificial probably, which has no connection with with these traditions. And for example, I had the conversation with a very famous dancer, and we were talking a bit about folklore, like in general. So I started talking about their Mahmoud Reda, and then I started talking about Eskandarani, and I got their opinion from another dancer that like, who cares? And that was the moment when I literally shut up, because I didn't have what to say. I didn't have what to reply, because I understood that it makes no sense to continue the conversation. But it was the moment when I really felt that I got scared, because this is their important opinion. It's not their, I don't know, opinion that I will share here in the kitchen with my friends, and they will say, who cares? This is the voice, and this is the person who travels in different countries and brings it. And I'm speaking, okay, now about the foreign dancers, so it's fine. Another point that I sometimes hear from quite famous Egyptian dancers, why should you teach Golden Era? Who cares? It's another problem. So I'm speaking now from both, from both sides. So from the foreigners who do not respect the folklore and start teaching your Raqs Sharqi, that is what Shining said about the tube, which is empty. But there is another point when your native dancers do not appreciate it. And here is what else scares me, because that should be the first people, the first teachers who will promote it, who will include it in their educational system. So that's what I wanted to share, like about some problematic questions here.
I'm not sure if we are going to find answers. It's just as Shahrazad said, to be aware of all of this. Indeed, I also met a few Egyptian dancers who said that Golden Era happened and it's done, it's dead, and it shouldn't be repeated. Some dancers got very angry if another dancer was dancing in high heel shoes. Yeah, so this is not easy to discuss, and it also, I guess, it depends on the person, on their internal beliefs and what they appreciate about the dance. That's actually, I don't know, I feel like we should be responsible, because okay, one thing is a dancer, and another thing is also a teacher. And to be a teacher, we have a big responsibility, not for paying bills and stuff like that. No. I mean, for responsibility for the dance style, I think, for the students, to provide them options and good sources as well. And my opinion is that definitely it is necessary to include history of Raqs Sharqi and all these connections into the classes. Now, I give you another question, another thing I want to hear your opinion about, because then you have your classes and you go to the class, hey guys, now I'm going to tell you something about the history of belly dance. And then you see the dancers like doing such a sound, right? Or worse. How to deal with that? Is it a problem? Is it not a problem? What do you think?
I would love to talk about this.
Go ahead.
I wish more of my students were on this call. It is a real challenge. I mean, and not just about teaching history, but teaching music, teaching culture. Julie mentioned folklore. Like the average new student, they walk into my classroom for any number of reasons, right? They want to get fit. They want to learn how to be sexy. They want to, and some actually walk in knowing this is a cultural dance and want to learn it. And I think, you know, the process that I've developed is, you know, you have to hook them in, and it's like, Badria, you'll love this analogy. It's like when a baby starts to grow into a toddler, and they have to grow into different kinds of food, right? So you can't feed lobster to a baby. And so you have to find ways to give them nutrition in ways that they can digest at that time, right? So you give them little things like, hey, you guys notice how the emphasis is on the 1 and the 3 in this? You're gonna hear that again. You know, these things, like, filter it in, but continue to advance the complexity, because as a teacher of a cultural dance, you have an obligation. I feel like a lot of teachers stop at baby food, and they keep filling their students with technique, but they're feeding them baby food about music, history, and folklore. And, you know, it creates these monsters, because then those people go out and they teach, because let's face it, this is an industry with no standardization, but I'm not sure it can have standardization, because in the culture of origin, this is a traditional dance, and traditional entertainers learn this in a traditional way, observing, repeating. And if we try to channel this into a Western balletic structure of academies and, you know, then we're going to continue to propel things in the way of the competition and workshop circuit. I mean, that's what that is, you know, is the standardization. So we have to find a way, and no answers here, but to strike that balance between keeping that kind of personalization and authenticity to the Egyptian way of learning, and continuing the tradition, while at the same time having enough integrity as instructors to recognize the importance of teaching these things. Because, like, I've been in a couple of calls recently, I'm calling them calls, but you know what I mean, on Zoom presentations, where there were questions being asked, and I'm not saying this, and I don't want this to shut down, like, students who are on this who have questions that they want to ask, but I see questions that are asked that sometimes I'm like, who is your teacher and why haven't they taught you this? And it's not the student's fault at all. It's entirely the instructor's fault that a student would not know certain underpinning things about the culture, the history, the music. You know, so I'm sorry, I get really fired up about this, because yes, I think that sometimes, you know, it's a challenge to get students to care about it, but I think that to an extent, as a teacher, you set the tone, right? So if you start your class with Arabic music, with the understanding this is what this is, the students accept that. Just like if you offer certain things to audiences, they learn to appreciate certain things. There's a feedback between the two, right? But if you're like, oh, they're just not going to sign up if I teach to Egyptian songs, so I'm going to do this to the latest American pop hits. Like, no, you're setting them up for failure that way. You have to set the tone as the instructor. You have an obligation as an instructor to do that. I'm going to stop.
I don't think you have to stop this.
Oh, Shining was raising the hand. So.
Yes. Sorry. And also, I thought Celeste. I think.
Well, I can just say, I think I got it out in the comment box, but basically, it's just a piggyback on that where, like, part of, when we're thinking about standardizing classes, I agree that to a certain extent, the way we think of standardization in terms of everyone doing things the same way won't work because of the essence of what Raqs Sharqi is in its cultural context. But we can look at standardizing the process of teaching to a certain degree when we're talking about exposure to the cultures of origin through watching old video clips as a group or having watch lists, but that's assuming the students will actually follow through, which a lot of times if they're there for fitness or things, they're not going to do that. So you do it in a controlled environment that ignites their curiosity. Like other people have mentioned, one of my teachers, like once a month in her classes, we'd all go to her house and watch the old films, and we could ask her questions and get our curiosity going and learn more through this conversational aspect. I think also, in terms of what's available now and the learning process that's available to us now, we really have to look outside the classroom. There are so many resources available through podcasts and documentaries and other online or in book materials, and a lot of people, like, there's a lot more information that people can pick up in a casual way that, at least in the current way that classes are run, don't often get addressed in class. Like, I know part of my learning, I used to clean my teacher's house and trade for classes because I could never afford classes, so I did that for like 3 years. That's how I learned about dance, because I would just sit there and ask her a billion questions, can you tell, while I was cleaning her house. But that also then later migrated into listening to things like the Belly Dance Geek podcast, and now I think more teachers are having those kinds of resources already listed and available for students, so that the students who are pre-inclined to that can really dive in. And for the students who didn't know what the heck belly dance was when they walked into class, they have an immediate understanding that this is a dance from cultural origin and that it requires a greater depth, even if it's not addressed directly in class, because maybe the class is focused on just, the free-form movement, and, you have more advanced classes that address those topics. But the whole structure around how we share dance with students, I think could have a little bit more formalization.
I would like to quickly jump in also. When you're talking about it now, Shining, when a student, just a random person, wants to take flamenco classes, Bharatanatyam classes, I'm not sure if the teachers or if the student goes to that class with the same feeling when they decide for belly dance classes.
Totally.
Right?
Hawaiian, Indian dance, any of those things, people walk in knowing it's a cultural dance because of how it's presented, or, the exposure they've had to it. Because of the exposure people have to belly dance in main media in the Western world and Orientalism and all of that, there's the perception and the whole fad of it being a fitness trend has already shaped what it is in people's minds, and so we now have to reverse that process, and that's a whole big thing.
Yeah, indeed. There was we had a lecture with Karim Nagy about it, and he also said also it's actually what we call it. Even we still use belly dance, the kind of terrible name for our dance style. It's Raqs Sharqi, what we are doing. So we don't call, as I'm quoting, we don't call flamenco foot dance or Bharatanatyam finger thingies or something like that. It's not a body part dance. It's a culture.
Badria, that's such a good point. But it's such a bind. Like, belly dance is in the name of my business because it's the only way I can pull people in to give them this education, So it's a really difficult line that I don't want to call it this, but if I advertise it as what it is, I don't have the reach locally, you know, and so it's an enormous challenge. And I think too, we really do have to understand the fact that for a lot of native Arabic speakers, they use the word belly dance synonymously for Raqs Sharqi when they're speaking English. So I don't think we can necessarily throw away the term, but it's a term that one of the first things I do when I have new beginners is I ask them a series of loaded questions. Where do you think this dance comes from? Do you think this is a women's dance? And why? And how old do you think the dance is? And then we talk about those things. And then I say, and by the way, did you know that this isn't really belly dance? And I tell them what it is. And I say, then you can go now to your family who's probably tittering about the fact that you're taking your belly dance class and tell them, actually, I'm taking a Raqs Sharqi class. Because they need to know that, but before they walk into my door, you know, it's a sticky wicket, as they say. And I don't want to veer off, but I wanted to go back to something that Shining said a long time ago in the chat about the 3-minute festival, like competition kind of performance. It's funny because this came up, I was putting together a combination, or maybe it might have been even the performance for the gala. And I'm thinking, man, I think this is too simple. It's so basic. I should put more things in this. And then I thought, wait a minute. If this were real life in a real performance, like to an Arab audience, this would be anywhere from 20 minutes to 30 minutes to 45 minutes. And 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes is just one phase of development of this whole performance. So I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves in a short performance to like do all the things, when a 3 to 5 minute performance is not, this dance isn't designed for that. So I'm envious of Shahrzad all the time. You know, when I was watching her band play earlier, I thought, God, I want a band. But anyway, I'm going to shut up again.
Please go ahead, Shahrazad. I think you want to, or you're typing. Well, it's, again, just an idea to discuss. It's all about environment, because those 3 minutes, that's something typical competitions, festivals. We also here had a limit, I have to be honest as well, for our open stage dancers, 3.5 minutes. We gave half minute more. And it's from the organizational point of view. That's again, that's why all of this is very complicated and not easy, because again, there is some pressure on the organizers or teachers to get some students into the class. So yeah, it's all not that easy. Yeah, but awareness.
Yeah, Badria, and I'm not falling, because I do the same thing when I organize shows. It's
Yeah.
all like capped at 5-6 minutes. But it's like, but for our audiences, in my own show, when I do my annual recital with my students, it's a time of self-aggrandizement, because I'm like, when I do my dance at the end, I'm going to use this time for things I want to try and do. And so usually I do a longer piece, because I'm like, I want to do a longer piece. But I can see the American audience like drifting away. I'm like, I don't care. There are Arabs among you, and this is for them.
Yeah, I also wanted to say about the time limit thing, like this, I think loops back into the general theme of this conversation of why it's important to have education about older styles and the history of the dance, because as a spectator who is not of the culture, you're going to be looking for different things to appreciate out of the dance than people of the culture are. So, of course, when we have a limited time to dance on stage, as a Western mentality, we're going to go for the more showy things that we think are going to be more entertaining for people. But I think once you have a more educated group of dancers and community of dancers, they're able to appreciate the more subtle elements of the dance that are so important to Egyptian audiences and Middle Eastern audiences that we just don't get because we're not growing up in the culture, we're not familiar with the music and how we can tie in our movements and subtle emotional themes into the dance. So like I said, I think this just ties in with the greater theme of why is this important? It's important so we can experience and appreciate this art from an indigenous point of view, as opposed to this Western point of view, which is so often, as we've heard in this conversation, based in a lot of Orientalist stereotypes and views about what it is. So yeah.
I want to jump in really quick and say yes, all the way, but also this is why, and I'm sure Nisaa's probably going to say this or something, but this is why doing an intro before your performances is so important, to give your audience, especially foreign audiences, context and a chance to adjust their point of view and perspective. You can give them enough information that tells them about the set of values associated with the dance traditionally, that they could be like, oh, okay, even if they're not consciously thinking that, once you've told them that there's a different set of values, they can attempt to adjust their perspective and try to see what you ask them to look for. That takes time, but especially when you have the chance to perform repetitively with the same audiences or those same venues, and you keep telling them this information, you literally are educating your audience. So that's all I wanted to respond to that.
I absolutely agree. Thank you, Shining, for the point. Just a quick, because I think it might pop in minds of our listeners. What about the time, the length of performances in Golden Era movies? Because of course, Golden Era movies don't reflect the Raqs Sharqi they performed on stages, in length and so on. Usually it's also 2-3 minutes. So this again shows how much it is shaped by the environment. And to be a conscious organizer, I think it's very, very important also to include the intros, to actually teach the audience to be happy to learn and to give the opportunity. And I know it's not easy as an organizer. Well, what am I saying? This is my first event I've ever organized, like a festival like this size. But what I see, it's not always easy for the organizer to be able to not to spend all the savings on the festival, right? Because this is not easy, especially in real world. But also, I just want to give here this idea back to the competitions, because when I started to dance, that is already 16 years ago, I think, there were, at every festival, there were always open stages. If there was a contest, there was just one in Germany, European contest, and there was belly dancer of the universe somewhere in the United States, across the ocean for us. And nowadays, before Corona time, there were always competitions, but no more open stages. And I think this is also very important to try to, I don't say that competitions are wrong or anything like that. No. They have their own places somehow. I guess. But to give opportunities for people to gather and also to perform, not just compete, are very important if we talk about the festival world. So to be conscious organizer, it's very important, I think. Anybody else wants to react to this or anything what was mentioned before?
I would also just say about the audience, and that it's very controversial question about the foreign audience, as far as it's not educated, as far as it stays very, very far from Arabic culture. When you travel abroad and then you perform classic Oriental, and then you see people are like, huh? You know, like I remember performing in Italy when my boyfriend, after he came to me, like, where should we clap? Where we should start clapping? I was like, what? And she's like, no, you know, you finished the dance. And because I confessed after the show that I was doing the golden era piece, and I performed, finished, silence. I'm like, disaster. I left from the stage. I was so upset. And then he was in the audience and he was like, you know, we just didn't understand when we should start clapping. I was like, oh, really? I was so pissed. But this is something that I really couldn't understand, as far as I usually dance for the dancers, because I stopped performing, and there are events like weddings for like more than maybe, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago. I really don't really remember that feeling, because first, okay, I was doing with Shamanan, with the wings and all the rest to entertain the audience. So I'm kind of more used that people know that when you start with Maksum, that people, for example, after your entry, they will start clapping, or when you will start, I don't know, another section of the music, they know when you need to start clapping. So, and just for their normal audience that has nothing to do with this culture and nor with the dance, for them, they even don't know when to start clapping. And that is like another point that it's not actually even about the festivals, because with the festivals, when there are lots of dancers, I feel more comfortable, rather than the festivals where, and sometimes organizers are so happy to say, like, we don't have only the dancers, we have so many people who come with their families. They're not the dancers and they just want to enjoy the show. And I'm like, okay, I'm not really sure that's gonna work, because I heard so many times like, Julia, you danced, one song was so nice, you did with a nice costume, and then you put that dress and that strange band on your hair, like, like not fancy. And this is that you feel such disconnection with what you're doing, and the audience who is not educated, but it's almost not possible to educate them. I had one experience. One time I came to China, it was like almost 10 years ago. It was not for dancing. I had a vacation, and my friends brought me to see their typical Chinese show, which was like different styles. It was like pieces of Chinese opera, and then their Sichuan masks, and then their stuffs. And the whole evening, I was trying to understand what they're going to, what they're showing me. I don't understand anything. So I was, kind of taken from the different part of the world, brought here. I had to enjoy it. But half of the show I couldn't enjoy because I couldn't understand what's going on. So I was just feeling so far from this culture. And this is like cultural things. They're everywhere, in anything with the dance, with literature. When I start discussing Dostoevsky and Tolstoy with my friends from Europe, they can't understand the cultural Russian things, something that I just feel it. So this is about your audience and about 3 minutes performance. This is like very hard to discuss, because sometimes I feel that I want to do like Nisaa said, I'm going to finish that dance. You better enjoy it. You don't have other choice. But on the other hand, I want, as far as I'm not very, honestly, I'm not a very self-confident person. So I'm actually quite shy, and I had to deal with that for a long period of time. So sometimes if I feel the audience is disappointed, or I think the audience is disappointed, I feel really bad. So for me, sometimes I'm thinking, like, if I really want to dance that beautiful song that I love that lasts 12 minutes, or I choose something, mise en scène with drum solo, because I know that there will be so many different people with different cultures, because I just want also to comfort them. This is, for me, for the artist, is another issue where I have to fight with myself.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. Whew, there are so many important topics we have touched, and we still didn't get to the point of letting people ask us questions. But I'm happy this discussion was very, very interesting, and I see more than 99. Wow, when did it happen? So, if there are questions from the audience, please go ahead and unmute yourself and give us the question, because I think to search in the chat box and everybody's just staring into camera and scrolling doesn't make sense. So please just unmute yourself, give us a question so we can, or the panelists can answer. And because we will have to wait a little bit, or is there anybody? We're listening. Okay, we don't hear anything. Perfect. This is the perfect awkward moment.
Everyone's thinking of their questions.
Oh yeah, Shani, come on.
I can always find something to say. I'm gonna talk. I made this comment here. I can't remember what someone said, but I was responding and I said also why it's important to try and view as many clips as possible. I think it was about the shortness. It's like when you're choosing to study a particular dancer, like this process I just went through with Naboy and Mustafa, like, and you don't get this where you can find 40 clips of the same dancer a lot of time. But for the big stars, you know, it's sort of a mistake to assume their personal style based off of even 3 to 5 clips. Like, diversify what you're seeing as much as possible, whether that means studying one dancer and seeing all of her different clips, or studying one era and seeing as many different dancers as possible, because it's sort of like comments I've made about learning Banat Mazen style Gawazi in the past. Like, we're not learning Banat Mazen, we're learning Kyria, because she's the available resource for so much of the time period, especially for younger dancers. So it's super important just to be conscious and seeking diversification in order to get a more well-rounded perspective.
Yep.
Can I ask a question of Shahrzad? Did I understand you earlier when you said when you moved over to Egypt, that was the style that you were performing in those clubs in DC or Philly or wherever you were, and then went to Egypt? Were you like, this is completely different and you had to adjust very quickly to this new venues and different things? Do you have like this kind of split personality, split dance personality?
That's a really good question. No, actually, I found that the experiences that I was able to have while I was still in the States, dancing with live music at mostly Egyptian and Lebanese nightclubs and some Moroccan ones, I feel like it actually gave me a skill set that set me apart from a lot of the other dancers coming in that didn't have those experiences. And especially because that was my focus before I started teaching. So I felt that I was able to get the skill sets of doing 30 minutes to an hour long shows with a live band, improvising and really feeling the music, because people would give me feedback in the clubs in the States as well. Obviously, there were still things I had to learn when I moved here, but my learning curve, as I saw in the past several years that I've been here, was a lot less extreme than many other foreign dancers coming to work here that didn't have those experiences behind them coming into the situation. And I would like to mention something that it was so nice to hear Julia talk, because there were a lot of similarities as well. Because I started dancing in nightclubs and then I went into the workshop scene, the first few years in the workshop scene, I felt so much pressure to be like the other teachers in that scene, when originally my style was so much rooted in the more traditional club style. And I ended up not liking what I was doing at a certain point, and I had to say no. And that was one of the big driving factors for me to move to the Middle East, was to immerse myself again in that world, and to a much more deep extent, obviously, being in the actual cultures of origin and not just in the nightclubs. But those early experiences dancing with live musicians and improvising were what I loved the most. And I loved my style the most when I was in that environment. So that's what really drew me in. And those experiences gave me a huge advantage, because honestly, these days, there's not even that many live music opportunities left. So if you're going to catch them, you really got to know what you're doing. And a lot of people don't. If you've only ever danced 3 minutes to like a ballad on stage for other dancers, you don't have the skill set to be able to improvise an hour-long show with this repertoire of old music. Again, why it's important to know the old stuff. They're still using standards, Abd al-Halim and Adawaya and Kulthum, as standards inside of shows here. So if you don't have that knowledge behind you and that skill to improvise to all of this stuff and work with the musicians, it limits the amount of work that you can actually take. So that's a really good question, actually. Thank you.
Can I just piggyback on what Shahrzad, why am I not able to say your name today? I was saying it a few minutes ago. You, the comment about music, I think that sometimes, you know, people are falling into this trap of like, young Egyptians and young Arabs, they don't like the old music. And that's not entirely true. The standards don't go away, and there are contexts that people do expect to hear them, like in a long form dance show. And, you know, and I think too, it varies at different levels of the society. And that's another issue that we don't talk about in the dance community outside of Egypt is, you know, the Instagram famous dance world that a lot of foreign aficionados of the dance are following is reflecting a very limited subset. Like, yeah, exactly. This much of dance as it exists in Egypt, these high-end nightclub settings, right, that are not accessible to the vast majority of the Egyptian population. When you dig deeper and you look at things that are going on at the average street wedding or in the countryside in a fellaheen wedding, things that are popular are very different, you know. So I think it's wrong to think, oh, it's just Mahragan now. Nobody listens to Kulthum anymore. That's inaccurate.
Yeah. What we see online is depicted, you can liken it to the golden era stuff of what we saw in the movies. That was only a tiny sliver of what was going on, and it was suited to that particular environment. And you have to realize that when you see things online, it's going to be a similar situation. Even in my personal experience, the past few years, I was working full-time with a band pretty much every single night. But a lot of those venues are, you can't take video, you can't do anything. You know, I was dancing to a variety of stuff. You just can't assume that what you see online is everything. And of course, in the golden era, we know the same thing. And that was something we were just talking about. That's just really good to consider, that we should still consider now when we're looking at things online. There's still huge variety. Obviously now in COVID times, it's pretty limited, to be honest. But before that, yes, it was still much more than what you see.
It's being said that we have to stop in the best. moment. I'm not saying that we are stopping right now. I just want to encourage people to give us some more questions, but we have to slowly wrap it up because we had our hour and a half. And before we get some other questions, I have to do one thing. Wait, sorry, I just realized we have to pick the winner. Before I ask you my last question, we have to pick the winner. I'm sorry, I forgot to pick the winner during the Belly Dance Museum tour. Sorry. So this is just a break. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it now. So I hope you're ready, everybody. Sorry for such a enlightenment. So this beautiful box, I bought it just for €1 somewhere on how is it called, fleece market or something. It's so beautiful. It's never mind. It's full of correct answers, or I mean, people who answered correctly to the quiz. So let me put it over here, and I'm going to send the postcard to the person. So I hope it's very far away from Belgium. I hope it will travel well. So the winner is this one, Isabel McLean. Is she here? Yes, you can unmute yourself.
I know her.
Yes? Okay, good. But we don't hear Isabel being here, but that's fine. Isabel, if you hear this from the recording, you are here with a little rabbit, and and you are going to get a surprise in several weeks because the post is very slow these days. So I'm glad I didn't forget. And now, do we have any questions? If we don't, I have a very good one. Well, good one. I think important one, because many people
Please ask us. We're nerds and we can talk about this for hours.
I know.
Okay, Reka, I remember Dr. Mogheddawi saying that what you see in the movie is sort of stuck because of the camera angle and the space and also the timing. So often these dances are like 2-3 minutes when they're much longer in real life. Also, don't forget that the music, the early golden era, they were done on 78 RPM. So the timing was very limited. The songs had to be shortened. The taksim had to be shortened. Like I can play taksim for 15-20 minutes, but not if you have a 78 recording telling me after 3 minutes you should stop. The first 3 minutes, I'm just warming up. Anyway, thank you.
Excellent comment.
I think it's really important. That's what I was trying to poke at earlier. It's like so much of the Egyptian aesthetic around Raqs Sharqi is about slow development and the build and the cascade of energy, and it takes time. And yeah, like the first 3 minutes of any song, whether it's at the beginning, the middle, or the end, are like the warm up, you know, or the cool down or something. So somehow it's just like, when somebody was talking about the whole like split personality, schizophrenic mindset, I feel that so much because I have all the contextual knowledge. I have some tiny bit of experiential knowledge because of the era and the locations of living. I haven't gotten like, you know, hours and hours of performance experience in a scenario like Shahrzad, or like you're seeing in the old films. You know, like my window is super narrow, so it's clashing all of that information, and you know, the knowing that is prepped for a Middle Eastern audience clashes against the audiences I'm actually performing for and the environment in which I end up dancing, which demands something different. And so I am sure that I'm not the only one that has that like crazy feeling as all of this information just sort of, you know, butts its own head, you know, bumps against each other.
Thank you very much. Guys, I see all these comments. Thank you very much. I have to react on it. That's very sweet. I will talk about it a bit later. I would like to now actually slowly wrap up. I know we want to talk. I know, like, I would love it as well. We actually can, but to make it as a nice event, I want to ask you last question, each of panelists. And actually, everybody who is still listening, try to just to grab the feeling if you have an answer or not, because sometimes there are questions where you know that you would have to search very much for the answer and you would probably find it, but sometimes you know it's missing. And okay, what am I talking about is what keeps you, I know it's standard question, but so important. What keeps you motivated in what you're doing, in the dance, in your research? Because I believe that many people who are here maybe went through the times when they lost some motivation for dancing or something else in their life. And dance is important part of our lives, of everybody who is now listening. So what helps you to go through hard times? What keeps you motivated? Because I think many people would like to know. So let's start. Nisaa, can we start with you? I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, because I saw you doing the face, you know, and it's always the teacher in the school when they are asking questions, they will notice the one who will be like, oh, I don't know. Sorry.
Exactly. You sussed me out pretty well. I mean, I ask myself this question because this has been, the last year has been a lot. And there are a lot of different things, I think, that keep me motivated. There's some internal motivation that I find in the research that I do. When I got interested in the history of the dance, I find that was something that I never get tired of that, you know, and I always have back burner projects around that going, and it keeps me, I'm never tired of it. I'm always excited when I open a book or a source. So that's one thing. But in the more practical aspects of my life as an instructor and a performer, when I have students that respond, you know, they get excited, that take what they learn with me to another level, that helps me to feel motivated a lot. That, you know, then I know I'm having an impact, that I'm just not locked in here reading obscure books about, you know, the Mamluk times of Egyptian history. But the third thing that over this last year, because this year has been hard for everyone on this call, I'm sure, is that, you know, it's been a blessing and a curse that we've been confined a lot to our homes, and thank God we had the technology when this happened. You know, it's not fun to not be able to interact with people live, but on the other hand, there are people that I've interacted with since this started that I never would have had the opportunity to interact with before. They're colleagues now that I have, colleagues on this call that I never would have, we wouldn't have been colleagues. We never would have crossed, we never would have crossed paths. And an event like this, I think, would not have been the event that it was without this. And for me, I sometimes, you know, my local dance community is very challenging in a lot of ways. And in fact, before the pandemic, I was feeling when I was telling one of my long-term students, like, I'm feeling really worn down. I need other people that are engaged in these questions. And so this has engaged me with international dancers who are like-minded in these interests. I mean, honestly, the fact that this festival happened and there were so many people who were interested in this content, that motivates me, because to have a whole festival on a nerd topic, and people are excited, engaged, and enthusiastic, and asking really great questions, that gives me hope, honestly, for even the problematic aspects of the industry that we were talking about earlier. Things like this give me a lot of hope. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Nisaa. Who would like to go next? Julia? Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Okay. What keeps me motivated? First of all, I feel that I have the relations with the dance. So it's actually like it's my partner in many, many ways. So not only my passion, but also my job, but also this is something that keeps me being strong, motivated, pleases me when I need it, or on the contrary, helps me to get excited. So it's very hard to leave something that you feel is necessary for you. So this is first the realization that it's necessary for me to dance, to be happy, to be alive, from being inside, I mean. And the other thing, when I when I'm upset or I don't want to dance, or I'm thinking like, oh, should I, which really happens very rarely, and thanks God it never happened during the last year. I think every time I just started. I mean, it's still so much to explore. Like, I feel like I just, I saw the iceberg and I just see its peak, and I even didn't dive and I didn't see what is under. So every time that I feel lack of inspiration, I would search for another workshop, for another event, for another lecture, like a few weeks ago with Nisaa. And thank you, Nisaa, by the way. Yes, it was an amazing, amazing class that I felt so much inspired, and the thing that we're all so different, and you're never alone if you don't want to be alone. If you want to feel that you have a community, you will always have it. So I don't, sometimes people say like, we don't support each other here. I don't have this problem. I'm surrounded with people who support me, and I do support them. That's how I create my circle. That's how I have their fans in their dance world, whom I trust, who inspire me and who motivate me. So I feel being a part of the community. And when I feel stressed, I search for help, not literally, I mean, calling someone, but probably doing some research or attending the class of this person, or simply reading the posts, or watching the new items in the Golden Era Museum. So that really helps me to continue, because I see so many good examples around me and people who motivate me, and I'm thinking like, I also want to continue doing it. So if you guys feel that you have the lack of inspiration and you stay home, you don't know, like from tomorrow here in Italy, there is another total lockdown, and I'm like horrified for other 3 weeks again, like total lockdown. But you know what? I didn't have even one time a thought in my head, like what I'm going to do, because I'm like, now I will have more time to do everything that I should. And I will finally start working with playing sagat, and I will do those combos with a sayar and this and that. Like, I still have so many plans, and it keeps me not only busy, but it keeps me motivated. So studying.
Thank you, Julia. Shahrazad, it's yours.
What keeps me motivated? Oh, was that the question? Oh, Um, I love dancing. And let me tell you something dorky. My earliest memories of what I wanted to be as a child, like what I said what I wanted to be when I grow up. One of them was a dolphin trainer. That doesn't have to do with any of this. But two of them were very applicable to what I do today. One of them, I wanted to be a stand-up comedian, and one of them, I wanted to be an Egyptologist. So I've always had these passions of culture and history and digging into where things come from and why, as well as being able to make other people happy. So dance, like, I love what I do, not just performing and being in front of other people. I love the process of learning and studying about what I'm doing because I find it fascinating. To learn about cultural and historical aspects. When I first started to hear real classical Egyptian music, I went crazy for it. The music is a huge thing that keeps me inspired and motivated because I genuinely really love what I do and I love the music. So similarly to what Julia said, the lockdown was almost like, yes, it completely changed a lot of things that were happening in my life, but at the same time, it opened opportunities for me to have the time to devote to things I really wanted to explore and study inside the history of the dance. I did a lot of studying about that. I did a lot of this new creation of new ideas, like the forming of this new musical group. I knew all of these people before. I didn't have time to sit down and make something with all of them until now. So I know my answer is going to be a lot shorter than everyone else's, but what keeps me motivated is really just the passion for what I do, the genuine love for the music and the art and the genuine fascination that I have with cultures and being able to learn as much as I can, and then being able to share that knowledge with other people, to both entertain people and make people happy, but at the same time give back to these cultures that are giving me everything that I'm able to do. You know, I really feel strongly about that. That's all. It was short.
Thank you very much, Shahrzad. I hope this gave some motivation and inspiration for all the listeners. And I would like to just say that indeed, if the COVID situation didn't happen, I hardly think that this festival would happen in this way. We are here, so there was something good in the lockdown, and I'm very, very happy that everybody enjoyed. I would love to spotlight my lovely two colleagues right now, Shayla and Chrissy, because without them, it wouldn't happen. Yes, I came up with the idea, but idea is not enough. You need people who help and who are talented and devoted as much as I'm. Girls, why are you not spotlighted? Thank you. Okay, finally we have Chrissy here and we have Shayla here. So this is the moment. Big claps for you girls, because I love you both very much. And you gave so much support and knowledge, and all your organizational skills helped to make this happen. And I thank you so much for all the work you did. Thank you to all the teachers, all the participants, guys. It was a wonderful event, I would love to say. And there was a question if we can repeat it. I saw in the chat. And I think it would be lovely if there are more events that are focused also on music, on lectures, because this is very important. Please Sheila.
And folklore. I want to add more folklore because I'm folklorist and I need it. That's my motivation.
Indeed, more folklore. Okay, noted. So I'm not going to promise anything because we are a team and we have to first discuss things together. But I think it would be lovely to do some small events from time to time, just some discussions, because I think that was very interesting to have some watch parties or another events. So hopefully there will be something more. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you very much, everyone. One more time, please keep studying, keep loving dance. And you know, there's one more element that also Julia mentioned. There are strong friendships formed within our community. Really, my best friends are dancers. So this is another aspect that brings us all together. So let's cherish it. Let's meet up again. Let's nerd together. Let's have fun and let's dance together. Hopefully soon, again in person. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye.